We're going to start from scratch. So let's say I want to gather data to decide which hallway is the best. Can I ask a random group of my students? No. Why not?
You only teach upper level classes.
Because I only teach upper level classes. And so and why is that a problem? Okay. It ends up, I'd be leaving a group out, yeah? In particular, the group I'd be leaving out, freshmen. Does this make sense so far? Should I just go down to study hall and get a random sample of study hall kids? No?
That'd be better.
It would be better? Maybe.
But you can't know for sure.
A lot of upperclassmen need.
Yeah.
Most seniors and juniors like to study hall.
So it would be fewer upperclassmen. Should I ask a random sample of staff members?
I feel like do the teachers actually care about the hallways?
I think the teachers would have, the group of teachers as a whole would, in terms of level of caring about the hallways, would be similar to that of the students. Not in terms of there are some teachers who absolutely love the hallway decorating and love to walk around. Okay? But there are some who are like, it's a distraction.
Mm-hmm. They could have bias based on like what grade levels they teach.
So are you good? If I were to say asking a random sample of staff members is better, but still depends. But I'd still need to consider grade level. So, for example, I shouldn't say ask a group like Mrs. Black, Mr. Peters, Mr. Wapner. Why? They teach all the freshmen, right? But what if I had the entire English department? Then you guys would feel a little bit more comfortable because every grade level would be represented within that. Do you guys see what I'm saying now? Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there other things you think I should consider?
Which hallway they're teaching?
Ooh. So I need to consider location. So for example, maybe the math hallway is going to be biased towards the freshmen. Or biased against the freshmen, depending on how annoying the decorations are. Right? If I had stuff that, I hope they don't put it, but I won't say no to it because this is an experience for you guys, but sometimes they put drapey things over the doorways. That would not make me happy. That would make me very annoyed having to walk through it. Because I go through my door to get more coffee all the time, and if I have to push through that stuff, second Friday, maybe I'll leave next Friday and have a special Starbucks ×2. It'd be a great day. All right, so what are some other ways we could gather data on which hallway is the best decorated hallway? There's one other thing I want us to consider. You guys, this is the first year this has happened. I am fairly certain that of the different themes for each grade level, I think there's only one that I am familiar with.
Is it the senior one?
Did you guys pick SpongeBob? SpongeBob is the one I'm at least familiar with, but I've never heard of Dinosaur Train or Phineas and Ferb.
Phineas and Ferb?
Okay, hold on, you guys. I'm going to talk Phineas and Ferb. When did it come out? How old were you? How old were you when Phineas and Ferb came out?
I don't know. It was probably 2007 or something.
2007.
Maybe. It came out in 2007.
I'm so good.
Okay, in 2007, I did not have any children, and I was 27 years old. So would it be slightly upsetting to see a 27-year-old with no children watching Phineas and Ferb?
No.
I mean, Jada just like binge watched like the entirety of it this summer.
How old is Jada?
17.
Not 27, not like full-fledged adult. Yeah? Yeah? You guys get why would I have watched Phineas and Ferb?
But like I feel like you'd know of it. I watched
Were you at least aware of it?
I don't think so.
This is stupid triangle nose. It's a very distinct art style.
I don't know.
Here.
You know what they look like?
What's the fourth one? It was Dinosaur Train, Phineas and Ferb. Oh, Dora. I have heard of Dora. Huh.
Harry the Platypus.
All right. I'm just saying, you guys, it's not that like reasonable that someone at my age at the time would have heard of it. I'd like you to remember we have a generational difference. Just because I act like a child doesn't mean.
Did you not like walk past the TVs at like Target and go, oh my god, they're playing Phineas and I don't know. Shows.
I can't wait till you're 27.
What?
So my
In your
coworkers
30s.
are 27 and they watch cartoons. So my coworkers are older than that and still watch cartoons.
But do they watch cartoons made for like
Yeah. Do they watch Archer? Because that's not.
No. Like one of my coworkers watches like Steven Universe still religiously.
I mean, it's like a.
It's a good show,
It's a
but
good
like
show, but it's like an older.
Okay, so anyway, guys, if you could pick any process for me to gather data to make the decision as to which hallway is the best, and that make that process a fair process, what would you do?
send out like one of those Google forms to like the whole school.
A Google form to the whole school?
Yeah.
Hey guys, who's going to respond to a Google form sent out to the whole school?
Probably not.
Anyone you tell to check their email.
I might. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Do you know how notoriously bad you guys are at responding to Google forms sent to your email?
Yeah.
Like, we laugh at how bad you are at responding to Google forms sent to your email, to the point that we'll be like, oh, we should ask the kids about this, and someone will go, oh, let's send them an email, and then we all go, ha 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 ha. They don't check their email. Because do you check your email?
Yes.
Sometimes. No.
I get notifications.
Only if I'm
every time
I
get
do.
an email,
Because I have to.
but I don't get that many.
I only check my email when I like know that someone's trying to talk to me,
I get them.
Let's say.
or I'm afraid
90%
someone's trying to talk to me.
I get them more.
Yeah. Let's just say that when I want to ask you guys a question, I don't send it over email, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and in fact, even if, let's go ahead and say you guys all checked your email. Have you, don't say this out loud because I already know the answer, okay? How many of you have ever ignored an email with a survey that has been sent to you? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? So are we good with emailing a survey to the school is probably not a good idea?
Yeah.
All right, so how do I do it?
Ask everyone like, oh no.
Ask teachers to ask the students in class.
Okay?
I was gonna say like pick a subject where there's every grade level has to take it, like English, and then go into each English classroom and like gather data in person.
Ask them when they come into the building.
Send out a remind, and you just have to reply with the grade level.
You would pick a small population.
A small sample
Yeah.
of people. All right, you know what I'm going to do for right now, you guys? I'm going to do that. And maybe what we can do is say, like, our goal by the end of, like, next week is that we might have some strategies to make this a little bit more, make our data more reliable. Okay, so let's do some basic definitions. The first one is going to be the word population. Have you heard the word population before? Yeah?
Yes.
What's a population?
Group.
People.
How much
Or
of them?
species.
Guys, we could have a population of people. We could have a population of a species. We could have a population of balloons. A population is an entire group. So, for example, in this bag, I have lots of balloons. I used them in my FST class yesterday. Okay? Lots of balloons. Population is all the balloons inside the bag. A sample is a subset of that population. Does that make sense? Now, in most studies, we study a sample instead of a population. Why?
The population's too large.
What, the more participants in a study, the more expensive, the more time consuming, the more complicated the study gets. Okay? So sometimes we're willing to say, hey, if I have a sample that is representative, a good representative sample, then, and when we say representative, the sample, I'm going to use air quotes here, looks like the population, okay? And if a good representative sample can usually be made, we can usually make reliable conclusions that also apply to population. So the reason I shouldn't take a sample of you guys or take a sample of the study halls is those samples, everything we described was that the sample wasn't representative, right? You guys are not a representative sample of Grandview Heights High School because there's no freshmen in here. Are you guys with me now? Okay. All right. Now, a census is a study done on an entire population. Now, I want to make sure we understand this, okay? This is not the census, okay? Though the census is an attempt to be a census, but there's more than the census. If I wanted to look at test scores on the Unit 2 test for all of the Grandview Heights High School AP statistics, I could look at everybody's test score. That would be a census. Now, there's two main types of studies that we can do. You have already participated in both of these this school year, okay? We have observational studies. I gave you, remember that beginning of the year survey, you had to calculate like the Scrabble score of your name. You guys remember doing that? Okay. That would be an example of a observational study. Okay? An example of an experiment that you unwittingly participated in was when we did the boys and then the AJ and Nate and then the Nate AJ. You guys remember doing that? Okay? Where some students got different titles on the thing, on the Word document as we played that game. Is everybody with me so far? What was the difference between those? Both of them you responded to questions, right? Which one's which? Or, a gajillion questions. Why was one considered an experiment and one considered an observational study?
We were aware one of them was being recorded.
Say that again?
We were aware that one of them was being recorded.
Well, so the bigger piece is you were aware the other one was being recorded too, in terms of what your response was, okay? But are you guys with me that for the AJ versus Nate, I imposed what I'm going to call a treatment, okay? And in other words, I manipulated you. Not manipulated you into like trying to make you do something you didn't want to do, because that's not all manipulation is bad manipulation, right? Are we good with this idea? Okay? But I made each student, I ended up putting each of you into a different group. So your class was all one group, and then the other classes were a different group, right? And each of you experienced the activities differently. I changed your experiences and looked for differences amongst those experiences. Okay? So, whereas the observational study was no manipulation. It was just asking you some questions, okay? So an experiment has what we call a treatment, and that treatment is anything you impose onto your groups, okay? And you would have multiple groups for each treatment in an experiment where you might not have that in an observational study. Is everybody okay? All right. Factors are things that influence our variable of interest. All right. Remember when we were talking about Phineas and Ferb and the fact that I wasn't familiar with Phineas and Ferb? Could that influence my familiarity with one of the themes influence which one I think is the better decorations? That would be a factor worth considering. Cool? Grade level. My association with the different grade levels is a factor worth considering. Okay. But you guys, that's what a factor is. It's something that influences people's responses without necessarily being we work on factors, we try to eliminate extra factors causing problems, but we eliminate what we can. Okay? All right. And then I'm going to we've kind of talked about these where we have the explanatory variables, usually independent variable with the response being the dependent variable. Typically, that response variable is our variable of interest, usually, but not always. All right. So next we're going to talk about some things we don't want. All right. So you guys have heard of the word bias before, yes? What's bias?
It's like your opinion on something.
Influencing.
Yeah.
Okay. The bias we're going to talk in this class is not personal bias. It's going to be statistical bias. Okay? But there is some things that one of the things I want us to know is like bias is not just like, oh, the person running the study is trying to make something happen. Okay? So the first thing we need to understand about bias is it's not about an individual's response, it's a systematic favoring of results of a response. And that does not make it intentional. Okay? And that so we kind of in the personal biases that people have. Sometimes it kind of comes across that people are intentionally like neglecting one group or another. In statistical bias, okay, usually it's not intentional. Usually it's an oversight. Okay, it's not the people designing a study rarely want it to be unreliable and have bad data. It just happens sometimes. Okay, now the first type of bias that we can get is called voluntary response bias, and it basically happens when people choose to be in a sample. So let's talk about why that's a problem. An example might be Mr. Belk wanting to know how people feel about study hall release. You with me? If he said, how do you feel about whether or not kids should be allowed to leave for study hall? Who's he going to hear from? Which students? Freshmen, sophomores. Why?
Because they killed me.
And,
They're mad.
huh?
They're mad.
And they're mad. Are you guys with me? Okay? So here's the deal. If people are happy with the status quo, they're not going to respond to a voluntary response bias. Do you guys, or they're not going to respond. It's usually the most extreme responders, if that makes sense. And sometimes we talk about, like, it really is people with strong opinions. And so it makes people feel like the responses then look way more polarized than what's actually. Do you guys see what I'm saying here? Okay, that's voluntary response. Cool? Undercoverage. Undercoverage happens when groups are left out of the sampling process. Sometimes we call that the sampling frame. So guys, remember when I said, can I just ask my students? The answer was no, because freshmen were left out. And likewise, could I just ask study halls? The answer was no, because they're not that juniors and seniors don't go to study hall, but they definitely would be underrepresented because of that. Okay, that's an example of undercoverage. Is this okay? All right. Non-response happens when people don't respond. Okay. For this one, I'm going to give you this example. Let's go ahead and say that as a school, we want to know, do kids feel that they were prepared for their next steps post-high school? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, were you, we send out a survey to people who graduated 5 years ago and say, can you reflect over the past 5 years and what do you wish we would have done differently? Are you guys with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. and we send it out to all 100 kids who graduated. Probably was more like 80, but we'll use 100 because it makes numbers easy. And we only received responses from 60. And they all said, yep, I was prepared. Should I assume that for those 60 people who said, yep, I was prepared, that it's 100%? Because the 40 who didn't respond are probably different systematically from the 60 who did. Do you guys see what I'm saying now? Does that kind of make sense of why it's a big deal? All right. All right. Response bias happens when responses aren't truthful. All right, you guys. Do not answer this question. I do not want to know your answer, especially because I've taught some of you in the past. If I were to say to a group of my students, I'm trying to figure out what percent commit academic dishonesty. Could I ask you guys if you've ever cheated on a math test? Should I be the one asking you that question?
No.
Why not?
You teach us.
Because I teach you, yes. Would you lie to me?
If you cheat, you probably would lie.
Yeah.
Do you guys see what I'm saying? Now, how could I do it better?
Get someone else to ask it.
Get someone else to ask
Get a student.
and do it anonymously so that I don't know who said yes or no. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Have you guys remember, have you ever taken some of those like drug and alcohol surveys?
Yeah.
Right? How many times have you tried alcohol in the past 24 hours? How many times have you tried alcohol in the past week, month, 6 months? Why do they ask you so many times? Not only that, if let's say the average is once in a week, do you know what those survey people think? It's at least twice. Why would they think that? Because people tend to underestimate. Even, that doesn't mean they're lying. It's that they maybe don't, underestimate for themselves, right? They're not aware. They're kind of like, when there's a moral implication involved in an answer, people tend to maybe, when they know that there's a right answer, in air quotes, they tend to give the right answer instead of the truthful answer. You guys get what I'm saying there? Which is why in the past 5 elections when people were surveyed in advance about were they going to vote or not, there were 70% of people said they voted when in actuality it was only 40%. Why does that happen? Because are we supposed to vote? Mm-hmm. In air quotes, right? Okay. Do you guys see how this works? And all of those are different response biases, a lot of times implying some sort of there is the answer I'm supposed to give, as opposed to the answer I'm good. That's actually the truthful answer. Okay? And this is a good place to stop.